on my soul, I am so infinitesimal. Oh, they say it started with a big bang, but they say it was really just a small thing. Strangely, I'm feeling like a big bang.
Hello listeners, and thanks for tuning in to Buffalo Lab Radio Free. I'm your host, Eunice Randall. We're filming today back at our old home base, the Foundry. We're hoping to get our old studio set back up for filming soon, but I've been really busy with a bunch of awesome side projects that I'm really excited to tell you about, but I can't yet because they're not ready. But stay tuned. I promise I haven't been idle. I'm also going to be traveling next month, so I appreciate your patience with our show schedule. But in the meantime, I'm going to teach you today a really basic skill, but a really important skill, and that's how to solder. Soldering is the basic building block for pretty much any tech project you're going to work on. I think everyone should learn to solder by the time they're about 10 years old or so. Personally, I didn't learn to solder until I was 18 or 19, and I kind of regret it. Mitch Altman from Noisebridge Hackerspace in San Francisco taught me how to solder, and now I'm going to teach you how to solder. In my opinion, kids can start learning to solder when they're about 6 or 7 years old, but it really depends on the kids in your life and what you think they can handle. Soldering can be a little bit dangerous. The iron gets really hot and you could burn yourself. In fact, you probably will burn yourself at some point, but that's part of learning. So let's get started. Okay, here's what you're gonna need. First of all, you'll need a soldering iron. Mine is on the fancier side, but you can get a really simple soldering iron and stand for about $15. It's probably going to come with a sponge to clean off your tip, but some people prefer this brass sponge type of tip cleaner. This is solder. This is what it looks like. A spool this size will last you for approximately forever. You're going to need wire cutters. The desoldering tool is optional. If you're perfect, you're probably never going to need one of these, but if you occasionally make mistakes like me, it's pretty good to have. This one is the solder sucker made by Adafruit, but lots of companies make their own. Now you just have to get something to solder. I'm going to teach you with this really basic kit from Maker Faire, but once you have the skill, you can use it to solder pretty much anything. First, plug in your iron and turn it on. A good temperature is around 350 degrees Celsius or 670 Fahrenheit, but less expensive soldering irons don't have temperature control, so just let it heat up for a couple of minutes. For this LED pin project, the first thing we'll do is attach the battery holder. Once we put it in place, it's time to solder. Hold the tip of the iron up to the component where you want to make the connection. That's called the joint. Here, the joint is where the battery holder meets the circuit board, which is the back of the pin. Let the iron get the joint hot for a few seconds, and then touch it with the tip of the solder. The joint needs to be hot first so that the solder will melt. Solder is so useful because it has a low melting point and makes a good electrical and physical connection. It should liquefy and flow around the joint to make the connection. A good connection looks like a small silver dome, and it hardens as soon as you remove the heat. Wipe the excess solder off the iron tip after every time you use it. Now we'll solder the LED onto the circuit board. Slip the leads through the holes in the board. Note that the longer lead is the positive and the shorter lead is the negative, so be careful how you place it. We can bend the leads back to hold the LED in place. The soldering technique is the same as before. Heat up the joint and then melt the solder. But we have to be more careful this time. The point here is to use the solder's conductivity to complete the electrical circuit between the LED and the battery. There are wires inside the circuit board too, so that the components attach. So it's important that the connections for the leads are separate and don't touch. If the solder blobs together in the middle, that's called a solder bridge. The circuit will be completed incorrectly and it won't work. But if you mess up and make a solder bridge, that's okay. You can fix it. Bring the iron tip to the solder to reheat it and it will flow again. Push down the plunger on your desolderer until it catches, then place the tip near the remelted solder and push the button. This activates the spring, which vacuums up all of the unwanted solder. After you're done soldering the components, cut the excess leads with the wire cutters. Hold the excess lead with your other hand when you clip it, otherwise it could fly up and hit you in the eye. The last thing we have to solder is the pin back. It's not part of the circuit, of course, but the physical connection will hold it in place. Put the battery in, and if all your connections are good, the LED will light. Congratulations! Now you know how to solder. And now that you know how to do it, there are tons of cool kits that you can get online to make all sorts of neat stuff from sites like Adafruit and SparkFun and MakerShed. I also want to do some more advanced tutorials at some point on the show, things like wearables and music devices and maybe robotics. And now that you know how to solder, you'll be able to follow along with those more advanced tutorials as well. Also, if anyone remembers Tech Scouts from Season 1, now we can add our soldering badge as something else we learned together. And you can get these badges on Adafruit too if you like them as much as I do. Anyway, that's our show, and I hope you learned something. Got any questions? Comments? Something you'd like to see on the show in the future? Just want to say hi? You can email me at eunice@blrf.org or tweet me at Radio Free Eunice. It's a community-based show, and I would love to hear from you. Until next time, I'm Eunice Randall, and thanks for watching Buffalo Lab Radio Free.
Strangely, I'm feeling like a big bang, 'cause I've been making mountains out of concaves. Do you ever really think about the grains? Every little one's got a million things.
Oh good, it's not hot at all. Is that 350 Fahrenheit?